Lakes Church. My name is Jess Sullivan. If we haven't already met, I'm so excited to welcome you from our online service this wonderful Memorial Day weekend. There are 3 reasons why we are strictly online this week, and I am going to tell you those reasons right now. 1, we are so grateful for our volunteers that show up week after week, and their impact is huge. And this is just one of those ways that we are able to honor them and give them a break of sorts. 2, we are back in person next week with our summer kickoff. We have so much going on, and this is a bit of a transition for us as we prepare for all of that. And 3, this is my first time doing announcements, and they're probably like, we should do recording first, which, fair. So if you could please text 1111, just kidding. Before I shoot you over to Dave's talk, I just want to say thank you, Great Lakes Church, for all the impact that you have made here, near, and far. I think back to a couple years ago when I started at Great Lakes Church, and one of the many things we do blew me away. Our partnership with Charity Water, where we provide clean drinking water to thousands of families in developing countries, where we have given literally their health and their time back. If you want to be inspired by the impact we make here at Great Lakes Church, head over to our impact page at greatlakechurch.com. There you will be able to see all the difference we have made for the past 14 plus years. And one more time, my name is Jess. Thank you so much for letting me be your host. Happy Memorial Day week. And one more time, my name is Jess. Thank you so much for letting me be your host. Happy Memorial Day weekend. Enjoy the talk.
Well, how's everybody doing? There it is. There it is. Well, today we are doing something that we're simply calling espresso shot. An espresso shot is when we do a talk that doesn't fit into a regular teaching series. It's just kind of one-off. And what it's intended to do is give you a boost of hope and encouragement. So I hope you're ready for that. All right? And we're going to jump into the talk in just a minute. Before we do that, I do want to say thank you for joining us this Memorial Day weekend. All right, this is the second year that Great Lakes Church has taken off in-person services on the Sunday of Memorial Day weekend. And the reason we decided to do this was to give our volunteers a break, our volunteers who serve week after week, month after month, year after year, and to just give them some sort of relief in the schedule, because the weekend after is our summer kickoff, which is a really, really big deal. And so let me tell you about summer kickoff, right? For those who attend our Weekends on Wednesday service at our Kenosha campus, summer kickoff is happening Wednesday, May 31st. Ladies and gentlemen, service starts at 6:30 p.m. But if you show up early, if you show up 5:45, 6 o'clock, we have got some food for you. And this year, for our summer kickoff, Manny from Manny's Snack Shack in Twin Lakes, Wisconsin, one of my favorite restaurants, he has agreed to make some French toast and eggs and hash browns. Now, if you've never been to Manny's, just check this out. Here I am with my buddy Larry. If you have never been to Manny's, you go to Google, and he's got a 4.8 review out of 5 from almost 1,000 people. All right, it's amazing. That's going to happen Wednesday, May 31st, right around 6 p.m. You are getting fed. And then on Sunday, June 4th, at our Kenosha and Racine campuses for our summer kickoff, we're going to have brats and hot dogs and nachos and giveaways and a whole bunch of activities. So the Wednesday evening service got breakfast food, and the Sunday morning has brats and hot dogs, right? That's how it is. That's Great Lakes style right there. Now, the good news for everybody is it's all free. So you just get to come and enjoy yourself. Your kids are going to have a lot of fun. Your students are going to have a lot of fun. By the way, if you're part of our online crew and you spend your time watching or listening online and you're unable to join in person, I don't want you to miss out. So go buy yourself some Lucky Charms or Captain Crunch. And on Sunday, June 4th, when you're watching the talk, get some sugar goodness inside of you, all right? One more thing about our Racine campus, at our summer kickoff, that is also when we move, just for Racine, to our summer schedule, which is one service throughout the summer, 10 a.m. for our Racine campus. Nothing changing for Kenosha, but our Racine campus, at our summer kickoff, Sunday, June 4th, we are going to our summer schedule, one service, 10 a.m. And if you're like, Dave, this is so confusing, we got too much stuff going on, it's because there is. And that's why we're catching our breath before we kick off the summer. And my hope for you this weekend is that you have a meaningful time hanging out with your family and friends, and that you get to celebrate the freedom that we have, and you get to take time to pause and remember the more than 1 million American men and women who died while serving in the U.S. military. If you've been around for a while, you probably know this, that my brother was a Marine, Richard J. Nelson, right? Corporal Richard Nelson. And Ricky died during a deployment in Iraq. He was killed by a roadside bomb. And ever since then, Memorial Day has taken on more significance, more meaning for us, and it's a time that's incredibly meaningful for all of our family. But Rick died on April 14th, 2008, and when he died, what we could never have known at that moment as a family is that it was going to force our family into a season of pain and chaos and heartache and uncertainty that we had never experienced before. And I would say to you, you can't relate. And you maybe can't relate in that exact way, but here's what I know you can relate to. All of us have stories of times and moments where we experienced a crisis or we were forced into a season of unbelievable pain. And the question that every follower of Jesus is going to have to grapple with at different moments and in different seasons of life is this: when my world is out of control, do I still believe that God is in control? I mean, it's easy to believe that God's in control when all of my prayers are being answered, right? And when everything's going well and when things are working out for me and good things seem to be happening. But when the biggest parts of my life have been turned into a pile of ashes, the question that I need to wrestle with is, do I believe God can bring beauty out of ashes? When decisions that I've made, when decisions other people have made causes my world to fall apart and things get really, really bad, do I believe that God can bring good from the bad? One of my favorite songs of worship is about how I'm going to sing about the goodness of God, and the reason I'm going to sing about it is reflected in the chorus. It's because all my life, you have been faithful. In all my life, you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. I believe those words, and I love those lyrics, and I listen to that song all the time. But here's the deal. When my marriage comes to an end, or when a family member dies, or when my health diagnosis is the exact opposite of what I've been praying for, I'm going to be confronted with the question, do I still believe that God is faithful? And do I still believe that God is good? And do I believe that he's going to be with me in the midst of the mess? Do I believe that God still loves me and he sees me and he is with me? When my world is out of control, do I still believe that God is in control? And how we answer that question is going to be determined ultimately by our view of God. Now, to put it very candidly, many of us have a small view of God. We don't think we have a small view of God, but every time we talk about God, it's clear that we're talking about a God who we agree with on everything. It's a God that we can manage and understand and explain. A God who doesn't bother us, he doesn't embarrass us, he doesn't confuse us or contradict us, he doesn't ever make us mad. And quite honestly, it's a small view of God when God reflects us and we just agree with God in everything. In fact, one of the most obvious ways that we have a small view of God is evidenced in some of the platitudes that we come up with, right? We say things like, well, you're never more safe than when you're in the will of God. Or, hey, I know you're overwhelmed, but here's what you need to do. Let go and let God. Or God will not give you more than you can handle. Be assured of it. Or everything happens for a reason. So I'm just going to tell you, the God of the Bible, the God that we talk about week after week after week after week, is not a God who can be reduced to platitudes. And if we're honest, for most of us, our view of God is basically a supersized version of ourselves, right? We believe in a God who he's bigger than us, but he's slightly bigger. And he's slightly smarter. And he's slightly kinder. He's a God who always aligns with us politically and agrees with us on pretty much everything. It's a God that we're able to predict and control, a God who doesn't confuse us or disappoint us. That's a small view of God. So back in 2008, my family and I, we went to Yellowstone National Park for the very first time. And one of the top sites at Yellowstone is Old Faithful, there you go, right? People travel from all over the world to see it. It's a geyser that erupts about 20 times a day. And here's the deal. You can predict with about 90% accuracy when it's going to erupt. Give or take about 10 minutes. So Rennie and I are there with our kids, and we're eating inside the dining room of the Old Faithful Inn. And when we were within that estimated time frame of the geyser erupting, we stood up from the table and we went outside to get as close as we could. And some of the people who were in the dining room along with us, they also got up, and some went to the windows, but others went outside as well. What was interesting to me is that as people were standing up and going to look at this geyser, there was a crew of servers and there was a crew of bussers who just kept on working. They didn't even seem fazed. In addition to that, there were people back in the kitchen who were cooking food. They were cleaning dishes. There were hosts that stayed in their positions and welcomed people as they came into the restaurant. There were several groups of people who did not seem fazed or impressed by Old Faithful. They never even looked in the direction. Now for some, it's because they take it for granted, right? They just assume it's always going to be there. For others, it's because they're expected to stay focused and to keep on working. They're not even allowed the freedom to look at it. For others, it's because Old Faithful has become white noise. It's just there in the background. They've seen it so many times that they kind of don't recognize it anymore. For others, it's because they're so busy, they really don't have the time to stop and take it in. I mean, they might glance up, but then they just got to keep on going. So here is this natural wonder. One of the great wonders of our world, supposed to produce these emotions of awe and astonishment. And yet there are people who, for whatever reason, seem to be immune to how amazing and how spectacular and how powerful Old Faithful is. Well, of course, that's how a lot of us react to God and to His majesty and to His magnificence. We go through life with our heads down, we're working, we're hanging out with friends, we're driving our kids around, we're checking things off to-do lists, we're fulfilling obligations, we're navigating the challenges of life. And we get so caught up in our schedules, we get so caught up in our routines that we tend to miss and overlook or are too busy for, and in some cases take for granted the power and the goodness and the faithfulness and ultimately the greatness of God. And so I want to take the rest of the time we have today and I want to talk about the greatness of God. In our world, the word great, the word greatness, it tends to be overused, right? We use it to describe places. Great Lakes, Great Plains, Great Britain. We use it to describe structures like the Great Wall of China or the Great Pyramid of Giza. It's an adjective used to describe products. So Tony the Tiger describes Frosted Flakes by saying, they're great. Yeah. Throughout history, there's people we've even called great. Catherine the Great or Peter the Great. And whenever someone uses the word great or greatness, it implies that someone or something has surpassed ordinary standards of excellence. So in comparison with everything around it, it is superior. Well, 3,000 years ago, King David of Israel, he writes a song of worship that includes these words. Great is the Lord. He is most worthy of praise. No one can measure his greatness. Anytime that greatness is being discussed, it is assumed that the reason something is great is because it's being measured against some sort of standard. So a singer is great because they sell more albums than almost every other singer. A boxer is considered great because they win more bouts than all the other boxers, right? Muhammad Ali, he has lots of achievements, lots of records, and so we call him the greatest. The reason we refer to Alexander III of Macedonia as Alexander the Great is because we compare his conquest to everyone else's conquest. And it's kind of a joke when you think about it, right? It doesn't make a lot of sense. The guy was ruthless. He was cruel. He slaughtered hundreds of thousands of people, but we call him great because he established one of the largest empires of the ancient world. As humans, we are notorious for measuring and numbering and counting and quantifying and tracking to determine the standard. So if you look in your pantry, every carton displays the weight of its contents. Every food label tells you the number of calories and fat grams and carbs. The gas gauge in your car tells you how much fuel is left, right? Your watch, the clocks in your home tell you how many hours are left in the day. Your budget tells you how much money you have left to spend. The bathroom scale tells you how many pounds you have left to shed, right? Your social media account measures how many friends are in your circle. Every single one of us are surrounded all day long by different systems of measurements. It is an obsession that humans have had throughout history. And what's interesting is we don't just measure food or pounds or structures or sales. We actually measure humans. When we make a new friend, when we consider the viability of a political candidate, when we interview someone for a job, what do? We assess their strengths and their weaknesses. We look for things that help us weigh their character and their abilities. We attempt to quantify their attributes to judge how worthy they are of our trust and our support. And the vast majority of the time, when we measure other people, we do it in comparison with ourselves. Because we're able to determine how smart we are, how wealthy we are, how talented we are, or how moral we are by comparing ourselves to other people, right? So if I'm in a room with a bunch of 6-year-olds, I feel like a genius, right? Like I've got all the answers. They're just gonna fire me with questions all day long until I'm just exhausted answering questions. But if I am in a room with Neil deGrasse Tyson or Jeff Bezos, I'm not speaking. I'm the one asking the questions, if anything. And as King David of Israel reflects on this reality, he writes the words we read a few moments ago. Great is the Lord. He is most worthy of praise. No one can measure his greatness. It is impossible to measure the greatness of God because everything about God, his love, his mercy, his kindness, his forgiveness, his grace, all of it is without limits. There's nothing about God that can be calculated. Now, you're not going to be shocked when I tell you this. You are not God, and I am not God. And so almost everything about us can be measured, can be weighed, can be quantified. In the first part of our Bible, we read the story of a great man by the name of Job. And Job vocalizes this observation to God. He says, you have decided the length of our lives. You know how many months we will live, and we are not given a minute longer. Almost everything about us can be measured, weighed, and quantified, including the time we have on this planet. On one occasion, Jesus looks to his followers and he assures them. He said, God cares about you. In fact, the very hairs on your head are all numbered. Now think about that, right? Every single day we lose 50 to 150 strands of hair. Some of you lost more than that, right? We shed 10 billion flakes of skin every day. Every 28 days, we get completely new skin. Every 9 years, our entire body is renewed. And what you need to be reminded of in the midst of this relentless shedding and dying and changing and renewing is that God continues to remember us strand by strand, flake by flake, atom by atom. Everything about us can be measured. It can be quantified. When someone looks at my birth certificate, they can learn I was born on July 1st, 1975 at 1:48 in the afternoon. Somewhere there's a record of my weight and the length of my body when I was born. But here's the deal. We don't have a birth certificate for God. He cannot be measured in any way. He does not have limitations. And as hard as we try, we can't understand that because we all have limitations. We have financial limitations. We have health limitations. We have limitations when it comes to our physical strength, when it comes to our energy, when it comes to endurance. We have limitations in how far we can see. We have limitations that we're forced to deal with. We're creative, but we have limitations in our creativity. Right? The most creative people on this planet were limited to a palette of colors and wavelengths or building blocks that were available. Guys, the greatest artists in this world are limited to whatever they have access to. All they do is take it, rearrange it, find new ways to express it, but they're limited. And this is why I say God is in a category all by himself. He doesn't have limitations. The author of Genesis, which is the very first book in our Bible, points to this reality. Here's what they write. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. At the beginning of time, when there was absolutely nothing, God created planet Earth. And he created the surrounding universe. And when he did that, he did not gather up a bunch of materials. He did not go to Lowe's and a Home Depot or onto Amazon and order a bunch of products. God did not have swatches or mood boards to look at. He didn't have a palette of colors to choose from. Instead, he created something from nothing. He created the oceans, and he filled them with 370 quintillion gallons of water. He was the mastermind in creating trees, and he planted more than 3 trillion of them on this planet. 60,000 different species of trees. He was the architect of the mountains, and he designed and he created more than 1 million of them. He created and shaped waterfalls and made more than 7,000 of them. Every bit of creation is intended to display his greatness. The Apostle Paul, he explains it this way to his first century readers. He says, "For ever since the world was created, people have seen the earth and sky. Through everything God made, they can clearly see his invisible qualities, his eternal power, and divine nature." God is the creator of all things, and all of creation reveals his power and his greatness. And the world that God created is so big that we're constantly making observations and discoveries about it. It's a world that's constantly expanding. In the summer of 1977, in order to understand a little bit more about this world, what NASA did is they launched twin spacecrafts known as Voyager 1 and Voyager 2. And the purpose of the mission was to explore the farthest planets. And that's what they did. And after exploring the farthest planets, the mission was complete. And so the mission evolved into studying the vast amount of space in between stars. And so these spacecrafts, these space probes, were launched more than 45 years ago. Here's the crazy thing. They're still going. NASA keeps track of them. Currently, Voyager 1 is more than 14 billion miles away from Earth. Voyager 2, 12 billion miles away. And they're traveling at more than 35,000 miles an hour, which is about as fast as some of you drive on the interstate. Right? Think about this, almost 1 million miles a day. But throughout their mission, they have taken tens of thousands of pictures, which have helped scientists learn about the atmosphere and the geology and the magnetic forces of certain planets. It's allowed us to see things for the very first time that there's no way we would ever seen before. Our universe is massive. It's enormous. It is excessive in size. And quite honestly, it seems like a whole lot of wasted space. I mean, if the primary job of this universe is to give you and I a home, it is way too big. But that's not the primary role. 3,000 years ago, as King David looks up into the heavens, he writes these words in his journals, in one of his journal entries. He says, "The heavens proclaim the glory of God. The skies display his craftsmanship. Day after day, they continue to speak. Night after night, they make him known." He continues. He says, "They speak without a sound or word. Their voice is never heard. Yet their message has gone throughout the earth and their words to all the world." The primary role of this universe is not to give you and I a place to live. It does that, but the primary role of this universe is to proclaim to us and to shout to us and to tell us day after day after day in every town and in every village and in every city and in every continent on this planet that God is great and he is magnificent and he is in a category all by himself. The universe is God's billboard. And it exists as an ongoing reminder that God is way bigger than we can comprehend or understand or imagine. Now, you probably know this. There's more than 100 billion stars in our galaxy. And during the day, the most prominent star is the sun. It's 93 million miles away from Earth, which doesn't really seem like it matters all that much, but let's be honest, if it was 93,000 miles away from Earth, big problems, right? SPF 50 isn't helping all that much. If it was 193 million miles away, colder than a mother-in-law's kiss, right? It's not gonna be a good thing. And so we are glad it sits where it sits. 93 million miles away, this massive energy producing light. And it's impossible for us to fully understand it. People have tried. Some say that the sun is so bright and so hot that if a local power company ran it, it would take the gross national product of the United States, right? So the sum total of our nation, of our wealth as a nation, for 7 million years to run the sun for 1 second. It is a powerhouse. The energy produced by the sun in 1 second is equivalent to the energy that would be released by detonating about 100 billion nuclear bombs. And what's crazy is the sun is just one of more than 100 billion stars in our galaxy. There is no way we could ever count them all. 1, 2, 3. And yet when King David writes about God, he makes it clear that he counts the stars and calls them all by name. The stars we're most familiar with are the ones in our galaxy, which of course is the Milky Way galaxy. Massive. 100,000 light years from one end to the other. Right? That means you turn on a light switch and you start running to get to the other side, it will take you 100,000 light years. Light does not travel at 60 miles an hour. It travels at 186,000 miles per second. It's 100,000 light years from one side to the other. So we've got 100 billion stars in our galaxy. And our galaxy is just one of more than 100 billion galaxies. So there's the Sombrero galaxy, just to see some of the uniqueness of these things. The Pinwheel galaxy, right? This is what we would call the Spiral galaxy. Here's something called the Helix Nebula, which is also called the Eye of God as it just sits there in space. And so this universe is a permanent billboard reminding us of God's power and his greatness. The heavens proclaim the glory of God. The skies display his craftsmanship. Earlier I referenced Voyager 1, the spacecraft, Voyager 1, Voyager 2. And back in February of 1990, as this spacecraft is flying at more than 35,000 miles an hour, and it's about 4 billion miles away from Earth. It turns around and it takes about 60 images of what it sees. 60 images to capture this panoramic view. Now, technology, of course, was not what it is today, and so it literally took months for these images to make their way back to Earth in order for the entire photograph to be assembled together. And when it finally came together, it was a photograph that stunned the world. It was given the name, the pale blue dot. And this is the picture that came back from Voyager. Here it is. Now I'm just gonna point this out, that these rays here are just reflections of the sun off the Voyager, but this is it. And when scientists saw it, they were just blown away. Because Earth is in that picture. Let me show you where. Right here. There's a dot right there. It's a picture of Earth from almost 4 billion miles away. The farthest picture of Earth we'll probably ever see. And when the whole scientific world is looking at it, these men and women of great wisdom, they just kind of stop in awe. And one of the leading astronomers of the day, Carl Sagan, he was involved with this team, the Voyager, that took the image. And when he saw it, he's the one who gave it the name, the pale blue dot, and he wrote about it in his book. And he says, look again at that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you ever heard of, every human being who ever lived out their lives. The aggregate of all of our joys and sufferings. Thousands of confident religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines. Every hunter and forager, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilizations, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every hopeful child, every mother and father, every inventor and explorer, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar, every supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there on a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. He says the earth is a very small stage in a vast cosmic arena. And then he comes to this conclusion. Our posturings, our imagined self-importance, the delusion that we have some privileged position in this universe are challenged by this point of pale light. And ultimately, at some point, the reality we're all confronted with is that regardless of how creative and how talented and how powerful and how wealthy or how influential we are, we all have limitations. We may be big, but we're not that big. We may be strong, but we're not that strong. We may be powerful, but we're not that powerful. And at some point, we have to confront that reality. And most of the time, when we're forced to confront that reality is when we're forced into a season of pain or chaos or heartache or uncertainty. And we realize we're not as strong as we thought we were. And we start to break in some way. And it feels like this life we've been building starts to crumble. And often in those moments, we convince ourselves that God doesn't have a clue what we're going through. And we stop singing about the faithfulness of God, and we stop singing about the goodness of God. He obviously doesn't care. And why should he? In light of all the other problems in this world, of course he's gonna ignore us. Of course he's gonna kind of push us away. And if that's where you're at today, you're dealing with unbelievable pressure, and you're growing more and more convinced that God is turning away from you, and you're thinking that God has chosen to ignore you, I wanna read to you the words of the Jewish prophet Isaiah, who asked these questions. How can you say the Lord does not see your troubles? How can you say God ignores your rights? Have you never heard? Have you never understood the Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of all the earth? He never grows weak or weary. No one can measure the depth of his understanding. He gives power to the weak and strength to the powerless. Even youths will become weak and tired, and young men will fall in exhaustion. But those who trust in the Lord will find new strength. They will soar high on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint. Our God is a great God. He has unlimited power. But come on, when we're overwhelmed, when we're anxious, when we're stressed, when we're discouraged, when we're fearful, we often end up with a very small view of God. None of us think we do. We're all like, no, I think God's big. So let me just be as clear as I can. If your God's job description reads, make my life more comfortable and convenient, then your God is too small. And if your God never calls on you to do anything challenging or anything that requires risk, your God is too small. And if your God's job is to obey you and do what you want, when you want it done, and if your God is a genie that exists to grant your wishes, your God is too small. And if your God operates on your timetable, if you're the keeper of his calendar, your God is too small. And if your God loves Americans more than he loves Russians or Iranians or North Koreans, your God is too small. And if your God never wrecks your schedule, if he never messes up your plan, if he never asks you to do something outside of your budget, if he never asks you to do something you're uncomfortable with, if your God needs a certain president to be in office in order to accomplish his purposes, your God is too small. If your God has never filled your eyes with tears because of his grace or taken away your breath because of his power, your God is too small. If your God always agrees with you, always thinks your opinions, your preferences are the most reasonable, if he always likes what you happen to like, your God is too small. If your God is Baptist, if he's Methodist, if he's Lutheran, if he's Catholic, if he's Pentecostal, if he's limited to a particular denomination, your God is too small. If your God ignores your sins, but obsesses over the sins of others, your God's too small. If your God fits neatly into a box of any size, I want to be really, really clear with you. Your God is too small. That's not the God of the universe. Because the God of the universe doesn't fit into any box. The God of the universe has no limits. And quite honestly, the God of the universe doesn't make sense. The God of the universe often leaves us with more questions than answers. The God of the universe sometimes allows us to experience way more than we can handle. The God of the universe often calls us to task that are beyond our capacity. The God of this universe often chooses not to step through time and space and heal our sicknesses and fix our problems. And I don't understand why, because I'm not God. But I am convinced that at the end of my life, I'm gonna look back at the highs and the lows. And I will be singing those words, that all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you've been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. So when your world's out of control, do you still believe God is in control? Do you believe he loves you, he cares for you? Do you believe that he's with you? When you're looking at the ashes, do you believe that he can bring beauty out of ashes? When you're brokenhearted, do you believe he can heal the brokenhearted? Do you believe that ultimately he is a great God? One of the questions that I'm asked most about regarding Great Lakes Church, I was asked it again this week, is what do you think makes your church unique? Lots of churches out there. What makes Great Lakes Church different? And my answer is the same every time. I said, well, Great Lakes Church, we work really hard to saturate our homes and our neighborhoods and our communities with the good news of Jesus. And then I say, and let me tell you what the good news of Jesus is. It's that we can be free from the weight of religion. We can be free from the weight of having to do more and try harder and get better. And I say, at Great Lakes Church, we are obsessed with pointing people to a great God and reminding people that who we are is anchored in Jesus' accomplishments, not ours, his strength, not ours, his performance, not ours. And so I say, the bottom line is we don't talk a lot about self-improvement plans. Instead, we talk about the one who saves us from our self-improvement plans. A God whose grace and mercy and love and compassion has no limits, because you cannot measure our God. And so I want to end today by praying over you and echoing the words of King David of Israel, who sang this song in expression of thanks to God. He said, give thanks to the Lord and proclaim his goodness. Let the whole world know what he has done. Sing to him. Yes, sing his praises. Tell everyone about his wonderful deeds. Let the whole earth sing to the Lord. Each day proclaim the good news that he saves. Publish his glorious deeds among the nations. Tell everyone about the amazing things he does. Great is the Lord. He is most worthy of praise. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His faithful love endures forever. Have a great week, everybody. Love you.